Hello, and welcome back to the Hands Up If You're Human podcast and to the Inalienable Truths series of episodes. In these episodes, we will look at our incredible storytelling ability, how unhelpful most of those stories are, and what we are left with when we strip the stories away. My name is Wyndham. I am the Blueprint Coach. Welcome back to the podcast and specifically to these Inalienable Truths series of episodes. I had the realization but over the last 2 or 3 episodes, I've been a bit low energy. Now, in part, that's because I've been sick, but it's also in part because sometimes I like to take my time. And I did actually have a comment once on YouTube where somebody had just written, "You're boring me out, man. Could you speak any slower?" And I couldn't help but put the Chandler Bing inflection on that. Could you speak any slower? Yeah, I can. I can speak very slowly. Anyway, point is, I'm going to try and keep the energy a little bit higher from now on. We shall see how annoying that is or actually how sustainable that is. But today, let's get straight into it. Because today's a really interesting one for me because it starts to really demonstrate how all of these inalienable truths come together. And when they come together, they create this solid ground I refer to of what is. Talk about the fact we tell ourselves lots of stories. They're always, a large proportion of them is fiction. But because we are so good at storytelling, they essentially become true in our minds, and we're then dealing with the story rather than necessarily what the problem is. So let's give you inalienable truth number 6. Regret is the inability to accept the unintended consequences of our choices. See how that lands for a second. Regret is the inability to accept the unintended consequences of our choices. Now, I'll give you the touch of nuance that goes with it as well. We often regret past, excuse me, I've still got this frustrating cough. Frustration, by the way, is the next inalienable truth. Touch of nuance. We often regret past decisions based on the impact of the unintended consequences of the choices we make. Instead of regret, accept the inevitability of unintended consequences. If you don't like the outcome, change it. If you can't change it, learn from it, accept it, and move on. And the reason I think this is a really interesting one from the perspective of how it interlinks with all the other inalienable truths, or rather it starts to show how they all fit in together. Before we talk about regret, let's just flick back through the previous ones. The previous inalienable truth was every decision has consequences, both intended and unintended. The one before that was all decisions are primarily motivated by a desire to expose ourselves to something or insulate ourselves from something. Before that, every choice you've ever made sense at the time. The one before that, you have a choice in every moment. And the first one was the truth will set you free, but first it's going to piss you off. So if you look at those in the other, as they build, you have a choice in every moment. Every choice you've ever made sense. All decisions are primarily motivated by a desire to expose ourselves to something new or insulate ourselves from something. Every decision has consequences, both intended and unintended. Regret is the inability to accept the unintended consequences of our choices. And I speak with lots of clients who are deep in regret because all we can really see, we lose track so quickly of all of the things that were going on when we made the decisions we previously made. And let's be crystal clear. We make those decisions really without understanding any of this stuff. We don't make those decisions with a conscious part of our brain saying, this makes sense. We don't make those decisions historically with the context that, as well as what I am trying to create, it is an inevitability I will create something that I don't want so much. We don't have that awareness. So we arrive at this point where our life doesn't feel like what we want it to be. And deep down, we recognize that we are where we are because of the decisions we have made. I think, given we may find some excuses, of course, but we understand that at a deeper level. And therefore, we beat ourselves up because where we are is not where we want to be. And then we go, well, I made the decision, so I regret those decisions, having lost track of the fact that at the time, they helped us create some intended consequences that made sense at the time, that were either insulating us or exposing us to something. So we have this emotion of regret that fundamentally doesn't help. And there's this very common question: oh, what regrets do you have? And this regret piece falls into two camps primarily. You have those people who say, I don't have any regrets. I am who I am because of everything. I am where I am because of everything. If I were to go back and change anything, I wouldn't be who I am now. And then you have the other group of people who include the wonderful and unbelievably knowledgeable, insightful, and inspiring Brené Brown, who have a sense that actually people who live with no regrets lack a sense of personal reflection. I'm somewhere in between. I think the person who says I have no regrets, I would have more questions for. Because are you saying you don't regret anything simply because you don't want to have any regrets? Or are you saying you have no regrets because you have worked through them? Let's remember this: regret is an inability to accept the unintended consequences of our problems, of our choices, sorry. So if we recognize we have a feeling of regret and we work through it, and we go back and we recognize that the choices we made, the choices we had led to the decisions we made, and they made sense in the moment, there was a very good reason why we did what we did. If we can understand that, accept that, and then face the reality of the unintended consequences and start to deal with those rather than the story we are telling ourselves, then we give ourselves this opportunity to process our regret. For me, regret is simply telling me it is time for a new decision. Now, it is incumbent on me to figure out what that decision is about, what my regret is truly about. Like I say, we're incredible storytellers. We can spin a tale that takes us in completely the wrong direction. I do some talks with the School of Humankind. Check out their website, schoolofhumankind.com. Excuse me. And one of them is about the stories we tell ourselves take us away from the real problem. The stories tend to weave veils in front of what the real problem is. And we typically then try to solve the symptom rather than the problem. When we're dealing with regret, it is simply our deeper wisdom saying there's something you need to look at. There is something you would benefit from making a new decision about. But we're hindered by the stories, right? We're hindered by the regret. We blame ourselves, and it's very difficult to act from a place of blame. So for me, this life of no regrets, if we can process our regret, if we can understand it, if we can accept it, and we can work on the reality of our unintended consequences and look to take intentional action, then we can get to a place of no regrets because we've accepted it and we've done the work to rectify what we can, accept, learn from, and move on from the things we can't change. So those two binaries, as always, there's more nuance involved. Hands up if you're human. We're complex and nuanced. So for me, there's middle ground between a person who lives with no regrets and a person And assuming someone who claims to live with no regret lacks personal reflection. If you have a very strong personal reflection practice and can work through all of this, I believe we process the regret and move to acceptance and hopefully intentional action to change what we can. There you go. I will give you that inalienable truth once more. Regret is the inability to accept the unintended consequences of our choices. And the touch of nuance, we often regret past decisions based on the impact of the unintended consequences of the choices we make. Instead of regret, accept the inevitability of unintended consequences. If you don't like the outcome, change it. If you can't change it, learn from it, accept it, and move on. I will leave you with that. I thank you so much for listening. If you are enjoying these episodes, if you're taking any kind of positive or value from them, I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe to the podcast, if you could like and comment, if you would share it with the people you think may benefit, it would be hugely appreciated. If you are interested in getting a free download of the companion book of Inalienable and Often Inconvenient Truths, then just visit my website, wyndhamjames.com. After about 30 seconds, you'll get a pop-up, fill in your email address, and you will be taken to a download page. Don't worry, I never send a newsletter. I find most newsletters just go straight into my recycling, so I never send one. But yeah, you can get the full 50 of these and start to work yourself on expanding that solid ground beneath your feet, where we are dealing with the truths of the universe we live in, stripped of their stories, but actually giving us a place where we can intentionally write our own blueprint and create the lives we really want to live. Thank you so much for listening. I wish you a peaceful, joyful, and happy few days between now and the next episode. The next episode, I've been really contemplating this idea of quick wins, that we're constantly bombarded by this idea of shortcuts and fast fixes and hacks and tricks and all these things. And I want to talk about that because there are many things in our lives that just take time. So the next full-length episode I'll be talking about trusting the process. But until then, I wish you nothing but challenges you are equal to. Take care. I will leave you with that, and I will speak to you soon.